Bhavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Saha Viryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Samasta Jana Kalyane Niratam Karunamayam Namami Chinmayam Devam Satgurum Brahma Vidvaram. All right. So we are continuing our reflection on the Maha Mrtyunjaya Mantra. Yesterday we saw a deeper insight to Triambakam, how the two eyes represent Ishvara and the third one represents Brahman. Today we have our Nitya who will share the meaning or reflection on the meaning of Yajamahe.
Hey Om. So today we'll talk more about Yajamahe, or as Shubhani-ji noted in the lecture last week, to worship. So worshiping can mean many things. You know, I feel like growing up thought of it from a more stereotypical standpoint, whether it's praying at a temple or singing at a church, or generally speaking, thinking of it more from that traditional mindset that it has to be at a house of worship. But as Shubhani-ji noted, with a very awesome framework, this doesn't actually have to just be within those confines or those channels. As noted with, it can be done through contemplate, concentrate, channel, or being content. And as I was listening and doing some reflection, this reminded me of the various different paths we can take as seekers to get closer and create and cultivate that love for the Lord and purifying our mind for that highest goal. And these are through the different paths of yoga, whether it's the path of karma yoga, bhakti yoga, or jnana yoga. And of course, because we had a lovely framework and alliteration last week, was thinking, okay, how can we come up with something for this week? So act, affirm, analyze, and acknowledge. So what does that mean when thinking about worshiping or worshiping Lord Shiva, or worshiping Bhagwan or the Mother Devi? What does that mean through action? I think it's best illustrated through a story. So this is actually a story about Lord Narayana. So not Lord Shiva, but related. So we all might know Narada Muni, you know, Sage Narada, great devotee of Lord Vishnu's, and in fact is known to always say, Narayana, Narayana. Which you would say, oh, someone who's always thinking of the Lord, like, of course he's the best devotee. And our lovely favorite Narada Muni thought the same thing. Once when he was in Vaikuntham, he asked Lord Narayana, who's your favorite devotee? And Shubhani-ji had mentioned last week, one of the most dangerous things is a sattvic ego. And I'm not saying the sage had that. Of course, Narada Muni was a Muni, but let's just say there was some expectation there with what the answer was going to be. And to his shock and dismay, the answer didn't come out to being him. Lord Vishnu went and said, oh, this farmer, this poor farmer in a village in a town in India. And Narada Muni was really taken aback. What? How could anyone be a better devotee than me? And reminder, we're talking about action or to act. So he observed this farmer from afar. And you know, the farmer lit the diya in the morning, acknowledged God, and then worked 12 plus hours a day, toiling in the fields. And this is physical labor, not this like nice work from home, cushy lifestyle I feel like a lot of us live. This was hard. But then the farmer would come back to his house, and then acknowledge the Lord, maybe a prayer before he's sleeping, and then sleep and repeat, rinse and repeat, day after day. And he asked the Lord, how's this farmer who's acknowledging you twice a day a better devotee than me? And Lord Narayana said, okay, actually take this pot of water, fill it to the brim, and put it on your head. It's like, okay, I don't know where you're going with this, but sure. So he puts it on his head and says, go walk all the way to that length of, you know, whatever distance and come back, and no water droplets should fall out. None at all. Of course, Narada Muni takes this very seriously. He's a devotee of the Lord, not going to not follow instructions. So he super concentrates and starts this journey to take that lap with the full water pot and coming back. And the Lord asks him, he's like, okay, how did it go? And he's like, over here, it was so good. No water fell out. I think I crushed it. And then lo and behold, he says, okay, well, how many times did you remember me? And he was like, oh, I guess none. And that's when the Lord told him, of course, you're a great devotee of mine, always remembering me, but this farmer who's acting in the world, as a laborer, is always thinking of me in spite of being in this world as a waker, as Akash mentioned, and acting. But he's still acknowledging the fact that all of this, whatever we're acting, whatever results we're given as a result of these, are because of the Lord. And he doesn't forget that, whether it's a famine or a drought or anything, there is that remembrance of the Lord as one acts. So for us, as individuals, when we're thinking about worship, for many of us, it probably starts with that field of action, whether it's in our daily work or what we do with our personal responsibilities outside of work. How often are we acting and acknowledging God? How often are we saying what it is that we're acting or the results that we're being given? By no means are they completely in our control. How often are we saying this is a result and primarily because of Bhagwan's grace? So as we think about worship, how can we more and more cultivate that remembrance of the Lord, even through our fields of action, which may or may not be done in a, quote, religious or spiritual context? Then thinking about affirmation or love. So this whole concept of self-love is very trendy, particularly with millennials and other girls my age, saying like, love yourself. And it's great. I think it says, have this acceptance and don't always criticize yourself. But if we take it one step further, thinking about through this context of, the mantra or even Vedanta, I think it's loving the self, that self that is in us, that we see manifest in the form of the Lord, or even unmanifest as everything around us and within us. But how do we create that, call it that relationship? How do we foster that? There's so many examples of great devotees, and there's actually this is a funnier, I'll say a lighter story about a devotee who did immense tapas for Lord Shiva. And as we know through Virtues Over Virus, Lord Shiva is a very compassionate Lord who listens to his devotees, which is great. But sometimes it's not so great. There was this asura, Bhasmasura. So many of you might know this story, but this is an asura, a demon, who was doing immense tapas and was truly devoted to the Lord. This wasn't just one of those times where you pray, but your mind is thinking about, what's coming next. He was doing this immense tapas, had this dedication, this devotion for the Lord. So the Lord was like, okay, I don't really differentiate between the good guys and the bad guys. So let me see what he wants. Of course, this Bhasmasura, while he was so shook and filled with reverence when he saw the Lord, at the end of the day, he was a demon and had these bad tendencies and wanted to be powerful. He first asked for immortality as a boon, which isn't possible, in this world of life and death. So Lord Shiva said, no, can't do that. What else? And he said, I want the ability where if I put my hand on someone's head, they'll burn. And Lord Shiva said, okay, tatastu, like, so be it. And little did he know, Bhasmasura, then his wheels were spinning. He's like, oh, this means I can burn your head. Of course, this turns into Lord Shiva doing the only thing that he can do and starts running for it. And as he runs, he even runs all the way to Lord Vishnu. And Lord Vishnu ends up saying, okay, I got this, I can help you. And takes this form of Mohini, beautiful dancer, of course, who enamors Bhasmasura. And even says, even though he pleads for her to be with him, she says she's a dancer and then ends up getting him to copy her, each of her moves. And he doesn't know he's slowly in the trap till one of her lovely moves ends with her hand on her head. He puts his hand on his head and burns. And while this is a funny story where Lord Vishnu had Lord Shiva's back for a devotee where this boon could have ended up poorly, I think it just goes to show that when we have this devotion, there is so much that the Lord wants to do for us. This love can be cultivated in a very personal way. The CHYKs, we actually earlier in February did something called a date with the divine. And one of the things we discussed as a group was, what would that date with the divine even look like? Like in this world, what would that look like? How would you cultivate that? Whether it's in nature or with what you input, and how would you constantly be, body, mind, and intellect in a place of love for the Lord? So think about that, how you'll affirm and love the Lord. And then the last A is analyze, which is what we do, I feel like, through the mission day in, day out, with the love and guidance of Shubhaniji, as well as Puja Gurudev and our Guru Shishya Parampara. How are we analyzing? How are we analyzing the mantras, analyzing the scriptures, and not just like listening to it at face value? What is it? Are we actually listening and then giving ourselves time to reflect and then act on it and changing our own behaviors? And I think, when we think about analysis, it's realizing like, there's only that. There really is only the truth. And am I living my life with that ultimate goal? And if I'm not, why not? Much easier said than done. And it's certainly a journey that feels very arduous, but at the same time feels like it's also very worth it, given that without it, we'll continue to be in this hamster wheel of life and death. So worship, it doesn't just have to be at a temple, or it doesn't just have to be in silence. It can be through the way you act. It can be through the way you affirm and through the way you analyze. But I think the best part in all of this is when you think about, in Kali Yuga, it's actually said, I think even if we just think and chant the name of the Lord, that's enough. And like, it's almost like that's our free pass out. Say we don't do any of these three and we just acknowledge, just even remember, that's enough. So, as we think about how we cultivate this devotion, how we worship the Lord, remember that it can take on so many forms, but eventually all of these are a way for us to channel that purification of our mind so we can be ready, so that truth can then be revealed to us. And it will take that fierce determination and surrender, but hopefully it's possible. So with that, Hari Om.
Thank you, Nitya. So that was a very nice way of putting how we can worship the divine. So now let us worship the divine through our japa. And as she said, in Kali Yuga, this is one of the easiest ways to go. One thing that works for all remedies is the name of God. It works. It will never fail. It's free. It's available. You could do it anywhere. You could do it at any time. We just have to do it. So let's do it.